At the birthday party of the mafia boss's disabled son, everyone turned their back on him, except the waitress. Today, I'm going to tell you the incredible story of Sofia, a simple waitress who stood up for a mafia boss's disabled son when no one else showed humanity. What happened next changed her life forever. Watch till the end, subscribe to the channel, and comment below where you're watching from. The underground banquet hall of the old palazzo glittered with chandeliers and gilded decor, filled with the murmur of mafia elites. At the head table, Don Giancarlo De Luca stood with a protective hand on the shoulder of his only son, Nico. The party was meant to be a celebration, but Giancarlo's dark eyes were watchful. Nico pressed close to his father's side, overwhelmed by the clamor of conversation and clinking glasses. Among the staff serving wine and canapes was Sofia Romano, balancing a tray of champagne flutes. Though hired help for the night, her attention kept drifting to Nico. She recognized his flapping hand and winced at every burst of laughter, signs of sensory overload that reminded her of her younger brother Matteo. Seeing Nico struggle made her heart squeeze. Giancarlo leaned down to whisper reassurance to his son, as a sudden cackle from a nearby table made Nico cringe. The Don offered the boy a pair of earplugs from his pocket, but Nico shook his head, curls flying. Even that small sensation might be too much. Sofia frowned. Surely Nico had a calming kit with noise-canceling headphones or a fidget toy. She noticed Giancarlo exchange tense whispers with his bodyguard Roberto. Roberto patted his pockets and shook his head. A flash of alarm crossed the Don's face. Nico's small backpack of comfort items was missing. Sofia's stomach tightened with anger at whoever had let that bag out of sight. A heralding call of, "Time for cake," rang out over a microphone, and the lights dimmed. A towering cake on a gilded cart rolled into the center, candles and sparklers ablaze. Nico's breathing quickened at the sudden change. The event coordinator cheerfully started the birthday song, and the crowd hesitantly joined. They had barely begun the first verse when a shrill feedback squeal blasted from the speakers. The sound tore through the hall like a knife. Nico cried out and clamped his hands over his ears, stumbling back against Giancarlo. His tablet slipped from his grasp and hit the floor. Giancarlo steadied the boy, heart in his throat, but Nico was already spiraling into panic. The guests fell silent, dozens of eyes fixed on the Don's son in shock or discomfort. Whispers spread at the tables. Is he okay? Some murmured with pity, but others with irritation. Sofia caught snatches of cruel comments. Not normal, unfit to lead, an older man muttered. Parents hushed their children and pulled them away as if Nico were a spectacle. One by one, guests edged back. Within moments, a conspicuous gap opened around Nico and Giancarlo. The crowd had literally turned its back on the boy, leaving father and son alone in a ring of empty space. Everyone had stepped away, abandoning the panicked child. Everyone, except Sofia. Sofia's heart pounded. She set her tray aside, unable to watch this cruelty a second longer. VIPs or not, this was a terrified child and he needed help. A memory flashed of little Matteo cornered by bullies while adults looked on, and how she had frozen back then. Never again. Mustering courage, Sofia approached Nico slowly and knelt a few feet in front of him. She kept her palms open and voice calm. "Nico?" she asked gently, her tone steady and warm amidst the silence. "That was a scary noise, wasn't it? It's okay to be scared." Nico rocked on his feet, a whimper in his throat, hardly registering her at first. Giancarlo's fierce gaze flickered to Sofia, uncertain but hopeful. He made no move to stop her. For Nico's sake, the Don was willing to grasp at any lifeline. From her pocket, Sofia produced a small foil-wrapped chocolate coin she'd picked up from a dessert tray. Holding it out on her palm, she spoke softly. "Hey, how about we take a little break somewhere quieter? You can hold this if you want." The coin glinted, capturing Nico's attention for a second. His eyes, shiny with tears, latched onto the harmless little object. "We can go at your pace," Sofia added. "You lead the way. I won't touch you unless you say it's okay. You're in charge." Nico's ragged breathing hitched. He glanced around at the adults averting their gazes, then at Sofia, the only one kneeling with him in his world of fright. Finally, he gave a small, desperate nod and reached out for the chocolate coin. His fingers brushed Sofia's trembling hand as he took it. Sofia smiled encouragingly. She rose slowly, careful not to startle him. "This way," she whispered, gesturing toward a side door leading to a quiet corridor. Nico clutched the foil coin and shuffled forward, drawn to the promise of escape. Giancarlo stepped aside to let them pass, his eyes never leaving his son. Sofia caught the Don's gaze for an instant. He dipped his head in permission, a sheen of gratitude there. They had barely taken a few steps when chaos struck again. A door on the opposite side of the hall banged open as servers arrived with more sparklers on trays, and a burst of laughter erupted somewhere among the guests, a jarring spike of noise. In the same instant, Sofia heard a different sound rising above the din, a faint, insidious hum. High-pitched, whining, growing louder by the second. Nico cried out at the new assault on his senses, dropping the chocolate coin. This was no random feedback or ringing ears. Sofia's eyes darted to the pile of wrapped gifts near the cake. One silver-wrapped box with a big red bow was vibrating subtly, its lid slightly ajar. A cold shock ran through her. There was some kind of device inside that box, emitting that sound. When she spotted a man in a gray suit lurking at the back, half hidden behind a marble column. He wasn't reacting like the others. Instead, he watched Nico with a predator's focus. Sofia saw him raise a phone, thumb tapping a message. His lip curled in a cruel little smile as he mouthed the word, "now." Her stomach turned. This was deliberate. Sofia lunged toward the screaming gift box. She ripped the lid open a few inches, desperate to shut off whatever was inside. The hum spiked into a piercing shriek, as if sensing its moment. Nico's hands flew back to his ears. He let out a wail of pain that knifed through the hall. Giancarlo's face contorted with rage. He started forward, hand twitching toward his jacket, toward a gun, Sofia guessed, but he stopped as he saw her scooping up the box. Clutching the whirring box to her chest, Sofia yelled to Nico over the noise. "Come on, almost there." With her free arm, she reached for him. The boy, eyes squeezed shut, felt her gentle tug on his sleeve and followed, stumbling the last few steps off the dais. Sofia kicked open the side door and pulled Nico into the corridor. Cool, calm darkness enveloped them as the heavy door thudded closed, muffling the chaotic banquet hall behind. In the dim quiet, the device's whine was still audible, though fainter. Nico sank to the floor against the wall, shaking and sobbing. Sofia's hands trembled as she set the silver box down carefully. An LCD display on the humming gadget blinked a countdown of seconds, timed perfectly to cause mayhem at the height of the party. Anger flared through her. She flipped the power switch, and the device went silent at once, leaving only the sound of Nico's muffled sobs. She knelt near Nico, not touching him, but close enough to be a reassuring presence. "It's off now," she soothed. "The bad noise is gone, Nico. You're safe." Nico's face was buried in his knees. Slowly, he lifted his head, tears streaking his cheeks. He gasped for air, panic still written in every line of his small body. Sofia knew she needed to help him steady his breathing. Softly, she said, "Smell the flower." As she pantomimed holding a flower to her nose and inhaled deeply. Then she gently blew out and blow out the candle. The child watched her, recognizing the coping exercise. Nico tried to follow along. Inhale, exhale. With each shaky breath out, he let go of a little of the panic. Sofia repeated the mantra, breathing with him, encouraging him with quiet smiles. Gradually, Nico's gulps of air turned into more even breaths. His rocking slowed. After a minute, he scrubbed at his wet cheeks with a sleeve. Sofia gave him a soft smile. "Better?" she asked. Nico managed a tiny nod. He was exhausted and scared, but he was regaining control. Relief washed through Sofia. The worst of the meltdown had passed. Then the reality of what had just happened crashed over her. This was no accident. Someone had sabotaged Nico's birthday on purpose. Sofia's eyes drifted to the silent device in its gaudy wrapping. The missing kit, the timed microphone squeal, this humming box. It was all a coordinated attack on a child, meant to strike at Don Giancarlo's heart and pride. They had wanted to embarrass the Don, to paint Nico as a failure in front of the clan. And they succeeded in making everyone turn their backs on the boy in his worst moment. Everyone, that is, except Sofia. She felt a tremor of anger. Who would do something so cruel? And what would they do now that she had interfered? Sofia realized she had just stepped squarely into mafia business. She was a civilian, a waitress, who had defied the powerful by protecting the Don's son when others stayed passive. It was an extraordinarily brave, or foolish thing to do, but looking at Nico now, seeing the trust in his eyes as he clutched the foil coin she'd retrieved for him, Sophia knew she wouldn't have acted differently. If keeping her vow to stand up for someone vulnerable meant courting danger, so be it. From inside the hall, muffled shouts and chaos continued. Sophia could make out Giancarlo's voice, taut with barely restrained fury, demanding answers. He would hunt down whoever did this. Of that she had no doubt. She only worried what vengeance might entail. A small hand reached out and tugged at her sleeve. Nico. He looked up at Sophia, eyes still glassy but earnest. With a shuddering breath, he managed a weak smile of gratitude. Sophia's chest tightened. This boy's simple thanks was more meaningful than any word the powerful Don could utter. Gently, Sophia placed her hand over Nico's, squeezing lightly in reassurance. "It's going to be all right," she promised him softly. In that quiet corridor, she was not just a waitress or a stranger. She had become his protector in the space of minutes. Footsteps pounded in the hall beyond, and voices drew near the closed door. Roberto and others, alerted by the chaos, coming to secure Nico. Sophia knew the peaceful bubble they'd found here was about to burst. She took a final calming breath and stood, positioning herself slightly in front of Nico instinctively. The door flew open, light spilling in as Roberto and two armed men rushed through. They halted at the sight of Nico on the floor and Sophia at his side. Giancarlo pushed past them a heartbeat later, wild concern etched on his face. Sophia met the Don's gaze, her chin lifted despite the adrenaline coursing through her. Nothing would be the same after tonight, that much she already knew. But whatever storm was coming, she would face it with the same resolve that carried her this far. She had stood by Nico when no one else did, and she wasn't about to back down now. Giancarlo pushed into the corridor and immediately knelt to wrap Nico in his arms. The formidable Don trembled with relief as his son clung to him. Sophia stepped back, heart pounding, as Roberto and other guards secured the area. Nico buried his face in Giancarlo's shoulder. The Don stroked his hair, whispering, "Sono qui, I'm here." When Nico's sobs quieted, Giancarlo looked up at Sophia. Raw gratitude shone in his dark eyes. "Thank you," he said hoarsely, the weight of those words evident. Sophia nodded, still catching her breath. Giancarlo stood, lifting Nico in his arms. "I have things to say to our guests," he murmured. He noticed Nico's hand gripping Sophia's sleeve, unwilling to let her go. "Stay with us," Giancarlo told her. It was both request and command. Sophia fell into step beside the Don as they re-entered the banquet hall. The chatter died instantly. All eyes locked on the trio, the stone-faced mafia boss, his shaken son, and the waitress who had saved the day. Giancarlo's voice sliced through the tense silence. "No one leaves." A few guests who had been inching toward the exits halted. The Don's glare promised consequences for disobedience. "What happened tonight was a disgrace," he said, each syllable deliberate. "My son was hurt and frightened, and nearly every one of you stood by." People shifted uncomfortably. Some opened their mouths with feeble excuses, but Giancarlo raised a hand to silence them. He continued, "Only one person here showed true loyalty and courage." He placed a gentle hand on Sophia's back, guiding her forward. "Sophia." A ripple of surprise passed through the crowd. Sophia felt her cheeks warm as dozens of eyes turned to her. She hadn't expected to be thrust into the spotlight. But the injustice of what happened pushed her fear aside. "Nico wasn't being rude or difficult," Sophia said, her voice clear and steady. "He was overwhelmed, and he needed help." She swept a hard look around the room, finding the faces of those who had sneered. "Mom, if your respect and kindness vanish the moment a situation is uncomfortable, then it's not kindness at all. If your loyalty to the Don's son is only good during easy moments, then your loyalty is just a performance." A few guests winced. One bristling man in a white suit snapped, "We didn't come here to be lectured by help." "Then perhaps you should have behaved better," Sophia shot back, unflinching. A room full of supposedly loyal friends, and a child suffered alone until a stranger stepped in. Shame on every person who turned away. Gasps and murmurs rose. A flush crept up the white-suited man's neck. "Don Giancarlo, will you allow this girl to insult us?" he sputtered. Giancarlo's eyes flashed. "You insult yourselves." His low voice cut through the air. "Everything she said is true, and unless any of you wish to prove otherwise, I suggest you hold your tongues." The room fell into chastened silence. Giancarlo shifted Nico in his arms, the boy now calmer and watching wide-eyed. The Don's gaze then softened as it settled on Sophia. "Miss Sophia has shown more honor tonight than many who claim to be my allies." He stepped closer to her, still in full view of the gathered guests. My debt to her, and my son's debt, is immeasurable. Giancarlo took a breath and spoke loudly for all to hear. Sophia saved my child. She protected my family. I intend to ensure she is part of my family from this night forward. Sophia's heart skipped. Giancarlo turned toward her and lowered Nico gently to the floor. The boy stood by his father's side, one hand clutching Giancarlo's pant leg, the other reaching for Sophia's. She grasped Nico's little hand automatically, her pulse racing with intuition of what was coming. "Sophia," Giancarlo said, his voice strong but filled with emotion, "will you do me the honor of joining my family? Will you marry me and help me care for Nico as his mother?" A collective inhale swept through the hall. Sophia's eyes widened. For a moment, the world tilted. She glanced at Nico, his face bright with hope, and then at Giancarlo's steady, earnest expression. This wasn't how fairy tales usually unfolded, but it felt profoundly right in its own wild way. Sophia found herself smiling through tears she hadn't realized were forming. "Yes," she answered, voice clear in the silence. "Yes, I will." Relief broke across Giancarlo's face. A cheer, half genuine, half obligatory, went up from the guests. Giancarlo inclined his head respectfully and, in a tender gesture that surprised everyone, lifted Sophia's hand to kiss the back of it. Nico let out a small, happy noise and wrapped his arms around Sophia's waist. Sophia hugged him back, her own laughter mingling with a sob of joy and disbelief. Giancarlo turned to the crowd, wrapping one strong arm protectively around Sophia and resting his other hand on Nico's shoulder. "From this moment, Sophia is under my protection," he declared. "She is one of us. Any who dare disrespect her or my son will answer to me." The warning hung palpable in the air. The reality of the Don's proclamation sank in. Heads nodded and toasts were murmured. Though shock lingered on many faces, none dared object. The social order had just been upended by Giancarlo's swift, irrevocable action. Within minutes, Giancarlo dismissed the guests. What was left of the birthday celebration dispersed in a muddle of hushed gossip. Staff hurried to clean, while bodyguards ushered out the last onlookers. Roberto approached quietly as Sophia helped a drowsy Nico sip some water. The security chief's expression was grim. He spoke softly to Giancarlo, but Sophia overheard. "We caught an intruder among the staff, one of Caruso's men. The device and the attempted filming, it's Caruso's doing, Don." Giancarlo's eyes flashed at the name. Caruso, a rival mafia family head, had long been a thorn in his side, but to target his son, that was a new low. "There was also an attempt to film the incident," Roberto added with a scowl. "We confiscated a camera and phone. They were trying to capture Nico's episode on video, likely to blackmail or shame you later." Giancarlo's fist clenched around the bug. "Caruso," he said under his breath, venomous. It didn't matter if the man himself orchestrated it or one of his lackeys. Giancarlo would hold him responsible. "He will pay for this." Roberto gave a curt nod. "We'll gather all evidence, Don. For now, I've increased security around the premises, and congratulations," he added, a brief flicker of a smile crossing his tough features as he glanced toward Sophia and Nico. Giancarlo allowed himself a faint smirk of pride. His hand moved almost reflexively to straighten his suit jacket and adjust his cufflinks, a gesture to reassert calm. "Thank you, old friend." Meanwhile, Sophia was kneeling with Nico off to the side, brushing a lock of hair from the boy's forehead. All the other children and mothers had left. It was just them and a handful of Giancarlo's men remaining. "How are you feeling, birthday boy?" she asked softly. Nico tapped a finger on the screen of his tablet, which Roberto had retrieved for him. A synthesized voice from the device softly spoke, "Better, thank you." It was the first time Sophia heard his AAC device voice that night. Slightly robotic, but endearing. She beamed at him. "You're very welcome." Nico's fingers danced on the screen again. "Stay with me?" Sophia's eyes misted. She nodded. "I'm not going anywhere, sweetheart." Giancarlo came up beside them, hearing that last part. "We should get Nico to bed. It's been a long night," he said gently. He exchanged a look with Sophia. There was a world of new understanding in that look, an acknowledgement of the strange path they were now on together. "Yes, of course," Sophia agreed. She moved to stand, but Nico grabbed her hand once more, as if afraid she'd vanish. Giancarlo noticed. "Would you come back with us to the estate?" he asked Sophia quietly. "Tonight, at least. I think it would help him sleep." The Don was asking, not commanding. A father's request. not a mob boss's order. Sophia didn't even need to think about it. If that's what Nico needs, then yes. She gave the boy's hand a comforting squeeze. Giancarlo nodded, relief evident in the slight exhale he let out. Our car is waiting. As the last of the guests trickled out, escorted by guards, Giancarlo, Sophia, and Nico made their way toward the exit. The grand hall looked forlorn now. Half-eaten plates, spilled champagne, and that enormous cake still flickering with a few dying candles. It wasn't the birthday any of them had envisioned. Sophia excused herself to quickly retrieve her purse and coat from the staff room. She left Nico in Giancarlo's arms, the boy now sleepy and nodding off on his father's shoulder. The catering area was deserted, just a few chefs cleaning up in weary silence. Sophia grabbed her things from a hook. As she slung on her coat, something fluttered to the ground. It was a black envelope, sleek and out of place against the white tile floor. Frowning, Sophia picked it up. Her name was written on the front in red ink. Sophia. The handwriting was elaborate, almost artistic. A chill slithered down her spine. She opened the unsealed flap and slid out a card. It was a mass card, the kind given out at funerals. The front bore a picture of an angel and a prayer. Sophia's throat tightened. Slowly she unfolded it. Inside, where usually would be written, "In loving memory of," her own name was printed in neat calligraphy, Sophia Romano. Today's date was listed as the date of her death. Her heart pounded wildly. At the bottom, scrawled in the same red ink, was a message. "Congratulations, Madre. Now you're a target too. Madre. Mother." The card slipped from her fingers, falling back to the floor. Sophia's breaths came shallow and fast as the implication sank in. Whoever had plotted tonight's attack was now acknowledging her new role, and marking her for death because of it. Hands shaking, Sophia crouched to snatch up the card and envelope. She scanned the dim corners of the kitchen, half expecting a lurking figure, but saw no one. The remaining staff were busy scrubbing dishes, oblivious. Sophia swallowed, forcing herself to stay calm. She slipped the card back into the envelope and tucked it deep into her purse. She would show Giancarlo once Nico was not present to see. There was no sense in alarming the already traumatized child. But as she rejoined the Don and his son at the side entrance, outwardly composed, Sophia could not shake the cold dread coiling in her stomach. She had stood up to a room of mobsters without flinching, but this personal threat felt more terrifying. It was a promise from someone in the shadows. "We will come for you." She looked at Nico, now asleep in Giancarlo's arms, innocent, despite all he'd endured tonight. And she looked at Giancarlo, who met her gaze with concern at her pallor. Sophia squared her shoulders. If being by their side made her a target, so be it. She would face whatever came. "Is everything all right?" Giancarlo asked under his breath, as Roberto opened the car door for them. Sophia managed a tight smile and nodded. "Yes, I'm fine." It wasn't entirely true, but she had made her choice. As the car pulled away from the ill-fated party, Sophia kept a protective arm around Nico, who slept with his head on her lap. In her purse, the black envelope felt like it weighed a ton. She was part of this family now, for better or for worse, and the storm was just beginning. Just before dawn, the black sedan arrived at Giancarlo's sprawling estate. A drowsy Nico refused to let go of Sophia, so she carried him into the dimly lit foyer in her arms. Giancarlo led them upstairs without delay, past a concerned staff member whom he quickly reassured, and straight to Nico's bedroom. Sophia lowered Nico onto his bed and pulled the soft blankets over him. The boy immediately curled on his side, clutching a well-loved stuffed rabbit. He was asleep again in seconds. Giancarlo stood by, watching with equal parts love and lingering anxiety etched on his face. When Sophia started to slip out of the room, Nico stirred with a whimper, half awake. Giancarlo gently stroked his son's hair. "I'll be right here, Figlio," he whispered. Still, one of Nico's hands reached out blindly until it found Sophia's sleeve. Even in sleep, he sought her. Giancarlo offered Sophia a guest room for the night, but she shook her head. "I'll stay nearby, in case he needs me." So it was settled. Sophia would rest on the sofa in the small lounge adjoining Nico's room. Giancarlo seemed grateful for her choice. He quietly shut the door of Nico's room partway, leaving it open enough so they could hear if the boy woke. They sat together in the dim glow of the lounge's low fire. An awkward silence hung, the events of the night catching up to them. Finally, Giancarlo spoke in a low tone. "Thank you for everything you did," he said, sincerity heavy in each word. "I know this all happened fast. That proposal was to protect me. I understand. Sophia finished, offering him a small, reassuring smile. And I meant what I said when I accepted. I'm here because I care about Nico. I don't regret any of it. Relief flickered in Giancarlo's tired eyes. He nodded. When everyone turned on my son, and then on you, I realized I had to act. Making you part of my family was the only way to shield you from their spite. Sophia reached over and briefly touched his arm. You don't need to explain. You did right by Nico. And by me. Giancarlo fell quiet for a moment, his gaze drifting to the door of Nico's room. He trusts you, he murmured. That means more to me than I can say. Sophia sensed a deeper history behind his words, because others betrayed that trust before, she said gently. Giancarlo's face hardened at the reminder of past wounds. He drew a breath. Yes, you should know. I've not been lucky with those I allowed into our lives. He spoke quietly, staring into the fire. My first wife, Alessia, could not accept that her son was different. She wanted Nico hidden away, sent off to an institution. I refused. Our marriage didn't survive it. Sophia's stomach twisted at the thought. Giancarlo continued, voice flat. Then came my second wife, Bianca. She seemed to embrace Nico at first, but it was a lie. Behind my back, she drugged him with sedatives to keep him calm. I discovered it only after he collapsed one night. His jaw clenched. When I confronted her, Bianca didn't apologize. She left in fury, after smashing Nico's favorite sensory toys and scrawling a note that said, "Mothers break boys," as her parting shot. Sophia inhaled sharply at that cruelty. Giancarlo's fists were closed, knuckles white on his knees. After that, he said hoarsely, I swore never to let anyone hurt my child again. I kept everyone at arm's length, until you. Sophia felt tears prick her eyes. She gently laid her hand over one of his clenched fists. I'm so sorry those things happened, and I understand, at least a little. She hesitated, then confessed softly. My younger brother, Matteo, is autistic too. Years ago I froze when some bullies hurt him. I didn't know how to help, and I've never forgiven myself. I promised I'd never stand by like that again. She looked up, meeting Giancarlo's gaze. That promise is why I stepped up for Nico, and I will never let anyone hurt him. I'll protect him with everything I have. Emotion thickened the air between them. Giancarlo covered her hand with his other one, squeezing gently. I believe you, he said. And in his eyes, Sophia saw a fragile hope reawakening. Hope that maybe this time, someone truly meant it. In that quiet moment, forged by shared pain and fierce love for the same boy, an unspoken pact formed between them. Sophia then remembered the envelope. She pulled the black card from her purse and handed it to Giancarlo. This was left for me, she said softly. Giancarlo's face darkened as he read the funeral card with her name and the chilling message. His fingers trembled with barely contained rage. Caruso, he growled under his breath, immediately recognizing the cruel handiwork of his rival. He looked at Sophia, remorse and anger mingling in his expression. I'm sorry. By bringing you into my family, I've made you a target to a man with no honor. But I swear, Sophia, I will not let anyone lay a finger on you. Before Sophia could respond, a knock at the door interrupted. Roberto stepped in, eyes flicking between them. Don Giancarlo, we've confirmed it was Caruso, he reported. The man we caught at the party confessed. This was part of Caruso's plan to undermine you at today's commission meeting. He's hoping to provoke you, possibly by targeting Nico or Signorina Sofia again, so that you'll lose control in front of the other bosses. Giancarlo absorbed the news with a cold, simmering fury. Sophia felt a chill at Roberto's words, but also a surge of resolve. She exchanged a glance with Giancarlo. There was fear. Yes, but determination too. Caruso had shown his hand, and now they would be ready. We'll do whatever it takes to keep Nico safe, and to not give Caruso what he wants, Sophia said quietly, her chin lifting. Giancarlo nodded, steel in his eyes. He wants a reaction, he will get nothing but regret. As morning light began to creep into the sky, Sophia and Giancarlo prepared themselves for the trial to come. In a few hours, they would walk into the Mafia Council meeting side by side, with Nico between them and a dangerous enemy waiting in the shadows. Whatever Caruso attempted next, they would face it together, and they would not allow him to break this family. Later that morning, the Commission of Mafia Dons convened in a stately old council chamber on neutral ground, a grandiose villa in the hills outside the city. The gathering was formal and fraught. Leaders of all the major families sat around a long mahogany table under a painted ceiling of cherubs and clouds. Giancarlo, as head of the De Luca family, took his place near the center. To his right stood Roberto and two other loyal capos, and defying all precedent, On Giancarlo's left sat Sophia, with Nico nestled close to her side. It was highly irregular for a child, or a fiancé with no mafia lineage, to attend a commission meeting, but Giancarlo had insisted. "My son and my future wife are under my personal protection," he had announced when a few eyebrows rose at their presence. No one dared object openly, not after word of the previous night's treachery had begun to circulate quietly among the families. Sophia was determined not to be a passive bystander. She had spent the car ride over running through her safety plan with Giancarlo and Roberto. Nico now wore a small backpack, with a few critical supplies they'd managed to gather: noise-canceling headphones, tinted glasses to soften harsh light, a fidget toy to keep his hands busy. Sophia had even programmed a special phrase into Nico's tablet, a single button that would play a pre-recorded message in Nico's voice: "I need help." It was their emergency signal, should chaos descend and Nico be separated from them. At the council table, Don Luca Caruso sat directly opposite Giancarlo. Caruso was a lean man with graying hair slicked back and cold, calculating eyes that lingered too long on Nico and Sophia. His lips curved in a polite smile that never touched those eyes. "Congratulations on your engagement, Giancarlo," Caruso said silkily at one point, and loud enough for all to hear. "And on bringing La Familia to the commission. How progressive of you." Giancarlo met Caruso's gaze with an expression of granite. "Family is everything to me," he replied calmly. "I keep mine close." The double meaning was clear. Caruso's smile flickered, and then returned full force. Of course, he nodded. The meeting proceeded, a tense discussion of territories and treaties under an uneasy veneer of civility. Sophia mostly kept her eyes on Nico, or scanned the room for any sign of Caruso's plot. Nico sat in a cushioned chair between her and his father, drawing on a notepad Sophia had given him. The low murmur of debate around them created a background hum of its own, but Nico seemed to handle it fine under Sophia's watchful care. Still, Sophia's pulse remained elevated. She rehearsed her plan mentally. If anything happens, loud noises, commotion, headphones on Nico, then hold him and move out the side door to the small antechamber she'd spotted on their walk-in. It was a designated break room for attendees, and conveniently would be empty during the meeting. That would be their safe space. Roberto had one of his men stationed in that antechamber already, just in case. More than once, Sophia caught Luca Caruso glancing at his wristwatch, as if anticipating something. Each time he did, he would then cast a brief, expectant look toward the far end of the room where a pair of servers stood ready to attend to refreshments. The servers were strangers to Sophia, likely local staff hired for the event. She felt a tightening in her gut. Could Caruso's people be among them? She leaned subtly toward Giancarlo and whispered, "The two waiters by the door. Do you know them?" Giancarlo's eyes flicked up. "No, they belong to the hosting family's staff," he murmured back. Sophia nodded, but her unease grew. She noticed one of the waiters tapping his foot nervously, eyes darting between Caruso and a large antique clock on the wall. Nico shifted in his seat, drawing Sophia's attention. He had put down his notepad and was squinting, rubbing his ears. Sophia tensed. Was he picking up on something she hadn't yet? Across the table, Don Caruso raised a hand. "Signori, perhaps a short recess?" he suggested. "We've been at this all morning. A break will do us good before we tackle the final agenda." The other Dons murmured agreement. A pause was customary in long meetings. Giancarlo checked on Nico, who was now covering one ear. He frowned. He heard nothing unusual yet, but he trusted his son's instincts. Sophia trusted them too. She quietly slid the noise-canceling headphones from Nico's backpack and prepared to place them over his ears. The chairman of the commission, a stoic old man named Don Massimo, gave a curt nod. 5 minutes recess, he declared, tapping a gavel lightly. Chairs scraped as men stood, stretching legs, some heading into the hallway to make calls or use facilities. Caruso stayed seated, pulling out a cigar leisurely, though Sophia noticed he didn't actually light it. His eyes flicked to the nervous waiter, who gave a nearly imperceptible nod. In the next instant, multiple things happened at once. The ornate chandelier lights went out, plunging the chamber into semi-darkness, lit only by slivers of daylight from high windows. Simultaneously, a deafening fire alarm bell began clanging through the halls, a deliberate trigger for panic. And underneath that cacophony, Sophia caught it. The telltale keening hum, faint but growing. The same kind that had emanated from the birthday gift device. It was an ambush of sound and darkness. Nico cried out, instantly slapping his hands over his ears and doubling over. But Sophia was ready. In one fluid motion, she slid the padded headphones over Nico's ears, muffling the worst of the sudden noise. With her other hand, she grabbed the boy and pulled him close against her, sliding them both down under the heavy table for additional shelter. "I'm here. I'm here," she whispered, even as her own heart hammered. Shadows moved chaotically around the room. Some of the Dons cursed in surprise at the alarm, fumbling for the nearest exits or looking to their bodyguards. A few emergency backup lights flickered on, casting long, eerie beams. "Sophia!" Giancarlo's voice sounded from above. He had not gone far during recess and was already lunging back toward them instead of seeking cover himself. She peeked out from under the table to see him silhouetted in dim light. "We're okay!" Sophia shouted over the clamor, lifting one hand to signal him. Under the table, Nico was whimpering, but holding together, thanks to the headphones and Sophia's firm arm around him. That damned hum was intensifying, audible even through the alarm. Sophia could see Nico squeezing his eyes shut. He could probably still feel the vibration. They had to move, as planned. "Safe room," Sophia called to Giancarlo, hoping he could hear. "Take us there now." He understood. He reached under the table, and together they pulled Nico out. Giancarlo wrapped his arm around both his son and Sophia, ushering them swiftly toward the side door. Around them, the chamber was in disarray. Somebody bumped into Giancarlo in the darkness, muttering apologies. 2 guards were yelling instructions about the alarm possibly being false. Amidst it all, Sophia glimpsed a figure darting toward the main conference table where briefcases and documents lay. "Not now. Focus on Nico," she told herself. Roberto appeared out of the gloom, waving them urgently toward the antechamber that Sophia had identified earlier. He must have fought through the panicked crowd to reach them. "This way," he barked. They plunged into the side room and slammed the heavy door shut. The alarm was more muffled here, and blissful silence met Sophia's ears as Roberto jammed a thumb on the antechamber's master circuit breaker, killing the accursed hum device's frequency. Or perhaps some jammer he carried did the trick. Either way, in this small room, the sudden quiet felt like a vacuum after the chaos outside. Sophia immediately crouched to face Nico. The boy was shaking, tears on his cheeks but eyes still open, aware. He had not melted down. He was frightened but conscious and holding on to Sophia's jacket with a death grip. Sophia stroked his hair and murmured soothingly, "It's okay, sweetheart. Loud noise is gone. You did so well." Nico's lower lip trembled. He reached for his tablet with unsteady hands. Sophia realized he was trying to communicate. She helped hold it steady as he pressed the emergency button she'd prepared earlier. In the quiet room, the tablet's speaker intoned softly, "I need help." Her heart broke and swelled all at once. Even through his fear, Nico remembered the plan. "I know, honey. Help is here," she assured him, pulling him into a gentle hug. Giancarlo knelt beside them, placing a protective arm around his son from the other side. "You're safe, Nico," he said firmly, kissing the top of the boy's head. He met Sophia's eyes over Nico's shoulder. The look conveyed equal parts gratitude and fury at whoever had orchestrated this. Roberto was already on his comms unit. "Lock the estate down, check all personnel now," he ordered tersely. Through the door, they could hear confusion still reigning in the main hall, though the alarm bell had cut off abruptly. Someone must have deactivated it once it was confirmed as false. A minute later, one of Roberto's men knocked and entered. "Don Giancarlo, all the bosses are fine. It was a false alarm as suspected. Power is being restored." Giancarlo's face was thunderous. "And Caruso," the guard grimaced. "Don Caruso was in the hallway when it happened. He's complaining loudly about security lapses. In other words, putting on a show of indignation." Giancarlo exchanged a look with Roberto. They both knew Caruso was behind this charade, but proving it was another matter. Sophia's mind, however, went to that figure she'd seen in the chaos. "Someone was by the table," she said quickly. "I think they were trying to steal something or plant something." Roberto's man nodded. "We caught a staffer with his hand in Don Giancarlo's briefcase. He bolted when confronted, but we apprehended him." "Good," Giancarlo growled. "What did he take?" "Nothing, sir, but we found this on him." The guard held up a tiny object between his fingers, a slim USB drive, likely trying to download files from your case or plant spyware. Roberto took the device, his expression grim. They used the alarm and the sound attack as cover for an espionage play. Sophia felt a surge of anger. Caruso hadn't just wanted to hurt Nico. He wanted to steal from Giancarlo, maybe sensitive information discussed at the meeting, or financial data. And simultaneously, he hoped to create a scene with Nico or even an opportunity to snatch the boy. Nico tugged on Sophia's sleeve, drawing her attention back. He pointed to his ears and around, clearly asking if it was safe now. Sophia peeked out the door. Lights were coming back on fully. The chamber beyond was settling, though tension still charged the air. "It's over, Nico. We're okay," she told him softly, easing the headphones off his head. He kept his hands over his ears for a moment, then slowly lowered them when he realized the din had truly stopped. The door to the main hall was open, and through it, they could hear Don Massimo loudly demanding order. One by one, the bosses and their entourages were filing back in, rattled but unharmed. Giancarlo stood, lifting Nico into his arms to comfort him openly. He was past caring about any disapproving glances. In fact, as they emerged from the side room, some of the other Dons regarded the De Luca family with newfound respect. Word had spread that Giancarlo's woman had shielded the boy expertly. Not all were sympathetic, perhaps, but a few gave nods that seemed to acknowledge both Giancarlo's trials and Sophia's nerve. Luca Caruso returned with an entourage of his own men in tow, clapping his hands together. "Well, that was quite the disruption," he announced, forcing a jovial tone. "Everyone all right? Good, good." His gaze landed on Giancarlo holding Nico, now and on Sophia at their side. He put on a concerned frown. "So sorry your boy had to endure that, Giancarlo. Terrible oversight and security here, isn't it? We ought to file a complaint." Giancarlo's answering stare was frigid. "Spare me," he said under his breath, too low for the whole room to catch, but enough that Caruso's smug grin flickered. Don Massimo's voice cut through. "We will investigate this incident fully. In the meantime, if all are safe, I propose we conclude the day's meeting and reconvene tomorrow to address any unfinished matters once we are not so distracted." No one objected. It was an abrupt end, but understandable given the circumstances. As chairs were pushed back and farewells made, Sophia stayed close to Giancarlo and Nico. Her body was humming with adrenaline, but they had made it through. Nico clung to his father, face buried against Giancarlo's shoulder, now that the immediate crisis was over and reaction was setting in. Sophia rubbed the child's back soothingly. Luca Caruso caught Sophia's eye from across the table and tipped his head ever so slightly, a ghost of a smile on his lips. The gesture sent a cold bolt of warning through her. This round had been chaos, but he wasn't finished. She could feel it. Outside, cars were already being brought around by drivers. The commission members were eager to leave this compromised venue. Roberto escorted their trio out a side door to avoid the crowd. The sun was high and bright, making Sophia squint as they stepped out. Giancarlo carefully set Nico into the back seat of their armored sedan, and Sophia slid in beside him. As Giancarlo moved to follow, a uniformed attendant hurried over. "Don Giancarlo, this was found for you," the man called, extending a small white envelope. It bore Giancarlo's name in looping script. Giancarlo tensed visibly, exchanging a glance with Roberto. He took the envelope, tore it open, and extracted a single sheet. His eyes narrowed to slits as he read. Sophia peered over his arm. There were only a few words, typed, not handwritten. "Tomorrow the commission will watch you kneel, while they film your new madre." Sophia's blood ran cold despite the warm afternoon. Madre, that word again. She felt Nico's hand creep into hers, perhaps sensing the adult's dread. Giancarlo crushed the note in his fist, face pale with rage. Roberto stepped closer. "Caruso," he muttered. There was no doubt who was behind it. Giancarlo gently pushed Sophia and Nico the rest of the way into the car. "We'll be ready," he said, though his voice was strained. Sophia squeezed his hand as he settled next to her. Inside, she was terrified, but also furious. Caruso was going to try to turn their love for Nico and each other into a weapon. They couldn't let that happen. As the car pulled away from the villa, Giancarlo unfolded his phone and began issuing rapid orders to Roberto and others. Increased security, new plans for the next day's meeting, contingency on top of contingency. Sophia held Nico close, her jaw set in determination. Tomorrow was already coming, and with it, Caruso's promised attack. Sophia silently prayed for strength. If the previous night and today had proven anything, it was that she, Giancarlo, and Nico made a formidable team. Caruso thought he could make the lion of the De Luca family kneel. He thought he could turn the new mother into a victim. Sophia's eyes hardened. We'll see about that. Back at the De Luca estate that evening, a hush lay over the house. After the tumultuous day, Nico had finally fallen into an exhausted sleep upstairs. Sophia sat at the foot of his bed in the soft glow of a nightlight, gently stroking his back. Nico's breathing was steady now, but a few hours earlier he had woken screaming from a nightmare, no doubt reliving the blaring alarm and chaos. Sophia had rushed to his side, soothing him with quiet words and a familiar lullaby until his sobs subsided. Through it all, Giancarlo stood by, watching from the doorway with a pained expression, as if every cry cut him deeply, and every lullaby note from Sophia was a balm on a wound. When Nico finally drifted off again, Giancarlo stepped in and draped a blanket over Sophia's shoulders. "You should rest too," he murmured. Sophia shook her head, keeping her voice low. "Maybe in a bit. I just want to make sure he's fully settled." She gave Nico's shoulder one last comforting pat, and then rose, following Giancarlo out of the room. He pulled the door nearly shut, leaving it open a crack. In the dim hall, Giancarlo hesitated, then said, "I owe you an apology." Sophia looked up at him, surprised. His face was drawn, dark circles under his eyes. "For what?" "For putting you and Nico in danger today." "For all of this," Giancarlo replied, gesturing vaguely at the air, meaning not just the events of the day, but the entire perilous situation. "Caruso is targeting you because of the choice I made. Last night I acted to protect you, but I also painted a bullseye on you. I'm sorry." Sophia studied his face in the low light. This proud, powerful man was genuinely guilt-ridden. She gave a small, sad smile and touched his arm lightly. "You did what your heart told you. You protected Nico and me in the best way you knew how. I won't second-guess that, and I certainly don't regret it." Giancarlo covered her hand with his. "Still, you've been through hell in just a day of being part of my family. Most would have run by now." "I'm not most people," Sophia said gently, "and Nico is worth every bit of it." At that, Giancarlo managed a faint smile. Gratitude and something warmer shone in his eyes. For a moment it looked like he might pull her into an embrace, but he restrained himself. Both of them were hyper-aware of the delicate balance between them. There was no time for personal indulgence, not with danger still on their doorstep. "Nico comes first," Sophia added softly, reinforcing the unspoken boundary between them. "Until he's safe, that's all that matters." Giancarlo nodded, respect in his gaze. Agreed. They moved to Giancarlo's study down the hall, where Roberto and a few trusted men were waiting. The heavy oak doors closed, and plans for the next day's confrontation began to take shape. On the wide desk lay an array of evidence collected over the last 24 hours. Roberto had spread everything out like an arsenal: the disabled humming device from the birthday party, a printed record of the text message "now" that one of Giancarlo's tech experts had pulled from a confiscated phone belonging to a man at the party, the micro USB drive and schematics of the bug seized from the council meeting staffer, even still photos from the villa's security cameras showing the so-called waiters sneaking around the circuit breaker during the blackout. "Caruso's fingerprints are all over these," Roberto said, chin raised with grim satisfaction. "Enough to convince the commission?" one of the capos asked. "Possibly," Giancarlo said. He stood at the desk, arms crossed. "But only if we catch Caruso in an undeniable act. Right now, this is strong circumstantial evidence. Caruso will just feign innocence, claim it's a setup or rogue elements," Roberto nodded. "Which is why tomorrow we allow him to overstep in front of all the dons. We let him incriminate himself." A heavy silence followed those words. Sophia felt a chill thinking of the note Caruso had sent, promising to make Giancarlo kneel and to film her. He intended something dramatic and vile. She took a steadying breath. "We know he plans to target me, to use me to break Giancarlo's composure," she said, voice even despite the fear curling in her stomach. "So we use that." Giancarlo tensed. "Sophia?" She met his eyes firmly. "I'll be the bait if I have to. We all know it's a trap. The difference is, we'll be prepared." Giancarlo looked as though he wanted to protest, but he couldn't refute her logic. Instead, he turned to Nico's contributions. "Nico noticed something important," he said, motioning for Sophia to pass him the tablet that sat on the desk. Earlier in the evening, once Nico calmed down, he had insisted on telling them something with his AAC device. Sophia had been astonished and proud. In halting presses and with some spelling, Nico had communicated, "Same man at party, same smell." At first Sophia hadn't understood, but Giancarlo had. He explained that Nico has a keen sense of smell. He often remembered people by scent as much as sight. Nico had apparently recognized that one of the waiters today smelled the same as someone he'd noticed at his birthday party. With some further coaxing, Nico had confirmed through his device that it was the man who had stood by the column texting "now" just before the chaos at the party. It was a breakthrough clue. One of Caruso's operatives had been physically present at both incidents. Giancarlo handed the tablet to Roberto now, the words still on the screen. "That waiter we caught. Get someone to verify his identity and background by morning. I suspect he's one of Caruso's crew under a fake name." "I'm already on it, Don," Roberto said. "The man's being interrogated as we speak." Sophia shuddered briefly at the thought of what interrogation might entail, but she steeled herself. These were dangerous criminals. Handling them gently wasn't an option. They spent the next hour refining their plan. Giancarlo would attend the reconvened commission meeting with Sophia and Nico again at his side. Caruso would expect nothing less. They would appear oblivious, allowing Caruso to think his threat had made them cautious, but not enough to change their routine. However, this time, Giancarlo had quietly coordinated with Don Massimo, the commission chairman, to subtly tighten security and to allow Giancarlo leeway to respond to any shenanigans, as the old Don put it, without immediate reprisal. Massimo was traditional and disliked chaos at his meetings. The evidence of yesterday's treachery had angered him. While he stopped short of accusing Caruso without proof, he gave Giancarlo a nod to handle matters, so long as the proof became evident. Additionally, Giancarlo's men would infiltrate the venue early in the morning. Some would pose as staff, keeping eyes on Caruso's contingent. Tiny hidden cameras and audio recorders would be placed at key spots, especially around where Sophia might be during breaks or recesses, since that was a likely moment for Caruso to strike. Lastly, Giancarlo had one more surprise prepared. He revealed a slim device to Sophia, a small custom signal jammer and detector developed by his tech specialists overnight. "This," he explained, "will block any high-frequency emitters Caruso tries to use, and also detect them. If a hum starts, it'll pinpoint the source immediately and broadcast a warning." He gave a meaningful look to Sophia. "We'll sync it with Nico's tablet, so if it senses that cursed frequency tomorrow, Nico's AAC will flash an alert, maybe even with the word hum. He'll know we're about to stop it, and Caruso's crew won't get the jump on us with it." Sophia felt a swell of emotion, both pride in Nico's contributions being woven into the plan, and admiration for Giancarlo's proactive cunning. She reached out and squeezed Giancarlo's hand. "We're ready, then." He turned his palm to clasp her hand in return, the brief touch conveying everything: gratitude, concern, determination. Roberto coughed discreetly, and they parted, focusing back on business. When the strategy was set and the night grew deep, Giancarlo insisted Sophia get some sleep. "We need you sharp tomorrow," he gently admonished. "I need you safe." She didn't argue. Exhaustion was pulling at her bones. She checked on Nico one more time, sleeping peacefully now, before retiring to the sofa in his lounge once again. As she drifted off, Sophia thought of Luca Caruso. "You have no idea what awaits you," she thought bitterly. They would turn his evil plan against him. The next day at noon, the commission gathered once more in the Grand Villa's hall, a sense of unfinished business crackling in the air. The Dons seated themselves much as before, though an undertone of anticipation lingered. The odd events of the prior day had everyone on edge. Sophia felt the tension like static electricity. She was dressed conservatively in a charcoal suit jacket Giancarlo had provided, to look the part of Donna, he'd said with a half-smile. Under the table, her foot tapped nervously, but outwardly, she kept a composed facade. Nico sat close to her again, headphones tucked in the backpack at his feet, tablet on the table before him with the special alert function running silently. Caruso arrived a bit late, striding in with an apologetic bow to Don Massimo. He gave Giancarlo a tight-lipped smile and inclined his head to Sophia with faux courtesy. She noticed his eyes sweep the room quickly, assessing variables. No doubt he was checking if anything had changed that could foil his plan. The meeting proceeded to its final agenda items: updates on enforcement of territories, mediation of a dispute between two minor families, mundane topics that belied the undercurrent of dread Sophia felt. Caruso spoke up at times, sounding measured and reasonable, and no one would guess the malicious intent hidden beneath his well-groomed exterior. But Giancarlo was not as placid as yesterday. Sophia could sense the barely leashed anger in him. He was like a lion pacing in his head, awaiting the moment to pounce. He said little, only what protocol required, his hand occasionally coming to rest on Nico's shoulder as if to remind himself of the stakes. Half an hour in, Don Massimo called for a short recess. He too seemed anxious to get through the day. Sophia's pulse quickened. This was it. Yesterday's attack had come during recess. If Caruso was to strike, it would be now. As people rose and milled about, Sophia exchanged a quick look with Giancarlo. He gave a tiny nod. Showtime. This time, Sophia didn't stay glued to Giancarlo's side. Instead, she excused herself to slip into the hallway, carrying a folder of documents as if planning to review them or make a phone call in private. It was part of the lure. She was giving Caruso a tempting window where she was apart from Giancarlo and presumably unguarded. In reality, Roberto's men were stationed subtly along the corridor and in adjacent rooms, watching every move. Giancarlo ostentatiously remained in the conference hall, talking with Don Massimo, projecting nonchalance, though Sophia knew his eyes were tracking her through the doorway. Nico stayed at the table with his father. They'd decided not to move him during the recess. Instead, one of the trusted capos, Fabrizio, casually sat with the boy, showing him a little spinning top toy to keep him engaged and calm. From the outside, it looked as if Giancarlo was simply delegating child-minding for a moment. In truth, Fabrizio was armed and ready to whisk Nico out of harm's way if needed. Sophia walked down the corridor a short distance, pretending to read the papers in her folder. The villa's design featured several alcoves and a cross hallway, plenty of blind spots. Her heart thudded. Any second now. The lights went out. This time not just the conference hall, but the corridor lights too, plunged to darkness. Simultaneously, Sophia heard the beginning of a high-pitched whine. It barely started to crescendo when, from back in the main room, Nico's tablet, linked via remote to Giancarlo's jammer, lit up bright and bold. Even through the wall, Sophia could hear its childlike electronic voice exclaim, "Hum." The warning came an instant before a muffled curse rang out in the darkness. Caruso's voice, enraged. Giancarlo's jammer had done its job. After the initial blip, the hum cut off almost immediately, squashed by counter-frequencies. Their side had seized the technological upper hand, and Caruso realized it. Sophia's pulse raced. She flattened herself against the wall, folder clutched to her chest, trying to make herself a small target now that the plan was in motion. Her eyes struggled to adjust, but she caught movement ahead. 2, maybe 3 figures rushing into the hallway from the side. Luca Caruso's hissed whisper echoed in the dark. "Find the waitress. Now!" The conference hall erupted into chaos as Caruso's order echoed in the darkness. Sophia pressed herself flat against the wall. Her heart thundered, but she forced herself to stay calm. This was the moment their trap would either spring or fail. Footsteps thudded as Caruso's men fanned out in the corridor, searching for her. One of them clicked on a flashlight, the beam slicing through the black. It swung wildly, finally landing on Sophia's figure at the wall. "Here!" a rough voice barked. Sophia felt a surge of fear as 2 silhouettes closed in. In the dim flashlight glare, she recognized one as the jittery waiter from the day before, now brandishing a handgun equipped with a silencer. The other held a small video recorder, its red light visible. They meant to seize her and record whatever humiliation they planned. "Don't move, girl," the one with the gun hissed, grabbing Sophia's arm brutally. His fingers bit into her flesh. The man with the camera moved to train it on her face. Sophia winced but did not cry out. In the back of her mind, Matteo's voice from long ago came to her. "Stay brave, Soph." She lifted her chin and glared at the camera, refusing to show terror. Caruso wanted her screaming. She would deny him that satisfaction. Before the thug could drag her 2 steps, the corridor exploded with noise and light. Giancarlo's jammer had been the signal for their counterattack. Emergency lights blazed on as power was fully restored, their tech teams doing, and a thunder of footsteps signaled Roberto's men rushing in from both ends of the hall. "Drop your weapons!" Roberto's roar was accompanied by the very real sound of guns being cocked. In the sudden illumination, 6 of Giancarlo's guards appeared like phantoms out of nowhere, all weapons leveled at Caruso's little crew. The man holding Sophia faltered, loosening his grip in shock. Sophia seized the chance, just as Matteo's therapist had taught for emergencies. She drove the point of her heel down on the instep of her captor's foot. He yelped and stumbled. Sophia wrenched free, twisting away from the gun. In a flash, Fabrizio, who had left Nico under Don Massimo's protection inside, lunged forward and slammed the gunman to the ground. The camera-wielding goon tried to run, but another of Giancarlo's men clotheslined him hard, sending the recording device skittering across the marble. Luca Caruso, realizing his plan was collapsing, emerged from the conference room doorway with a pistol in hand. His face contorted in rage at the sight of his men subdued and Sofia out of their grasp. For a heartbeat, his gaze met Sofia's. There was murderous intent there. If he couldn't get his footage, he might just shoot her out of spite. He raised his weapon, but a split second later, the cold barrel of Roberto's handgun pressed against the back of Caruso's skull. "Don't!" Roberto growled. Behind him, 2 more of Giancarlo's loyal guards flanked Caruso, guns drawn. The hallway fell into an eerie silence except for Caruso's heavy breathing. Sofia exhaled the breath she'd been holding. She was alive, unharmed, and Caruso was caught. "Che diavolo sta succedendo? What is the meaning of this?" Don Massimo's furious voice cut through the silence as he hobbled into the corridor, followed by other Dons and their bodyguards. They took in the scene, Sofia shaking but standing on her own, Caruso disarmed and at Giancarlo's mercy. Caruso's men pinned to the floor, their weapons and gadgets scattered. Giancarlo appeared then, pushing past a couple of elders to confront Caruso face to face. Nico was right behind him, escorted by one of Massimo's aides. The boy's eyes were wide, but he trotted straight to Sofia as soon as he saw her, wrapping his arms around her waist. Sofia sank to her knees and hugged him fiercely. "I'm okay," she whispered into his hair, voice trembling with relief. "We're okay." Caruso found his tongue spitting venom. "This is an outrage, an ambush. Giancarlo set me up," he struggled, but Roberto pressed the gun harder against his head, making him still. Giancarlo's tone was deadly calm. "Yes, I did set a trap, Caruso, because I had to catch a snake." He nodded to Roberto, who finally eased back, keeping Caruso covered, but allowing him to turn and face the assembled commission. Don Massimo's ancient eyes blazed. "Explain, both of you now," he demanded. Giancarlo spoke before Caruso could. "Luca Caruso has twice attacked my family in 2 days. He used the cover of our meetings to attempt kidnapping, extortion, and worse." He gestured toward the thugs on the ground. "We anticipated he would try again today and set measures to stop him." "This is a lie," Caruso snarled. He tried to compose himself, smoothing his suit with hands that only shook a little. Addressing the other bosses, he tried to adopt a wounded tone. "Yesterday's alarm and today's incident. I am being framed. Giancarlo cannot prove I orchestrated any of it." A low murmur rippled through the onlookers. True, by mafia custom, accusations without evidence could be brushed aside as ploys. Sofia rose to her feet, still holding Nico's hand, and stepped forward. "We can prove it," she said clearly. All eyes turned to the young woman who had, until this week, been a nobody among them. Don Massimo arched a skeptical brow, but Giancarlo gave Sofia a supportive nod. Roberto had already retrieved the scattered camera and the small devices from Caruso's henchmen's pockets. Within minutes, Giancarlo's tech expert, who had been hidden among the guards, was playing back footage for all to see on the camera's flip screen. It showed grainy but sufficient images of Sofia struggling in the dark, while 2 of Caruso's goons manhandled her, one clearly holding a gun and the other filming. The date stamp of the recording was literally minutes ago. Gasps came from the gathered mafia leaders. Even those allied with Caruso took a step away from him. Caruso's face drained of color. "This proves nothing," he said, but sweat glistened on his brow. "It proves your men attempted to kidnap and film my fiancée, right under the commission's nose," Giancarlo replied icily. He signaled to Roberto, who began laying out additional evidence on a table hastily cleared of coffee cups. One by one, Giancarlo and Sofia presented the damning pieces. The humming device and its unique frequency signature matched one purchased by a shell company tied to Caruso's regime. The text message sent at Nico's party traced back to a burner phone found on Caruso's man. The testimony of the waiter-turned-thug, sobbing now under guard, that Caruso had ordered him to trigger the alarm and attempt to bug the meeting. While some of these were highly technical, one piece of evidence cut through everything with simple clarity: Nico himself. Nico had been watching and listening, pressed to Sofia's side. Perhaps sensing it was time to speak, he gently disentangled and went to the table where his tablet lay. With all eyes on him, many of them startled to see the boy take initiative, Nico tapped the screen with purposeful determination. A computerized voice, innocent and monotone, spoke into the stunned hush. "They put humbox." Sofia felt tears prick her eyes. She moved to Nico's side as he pressed another phrase. "They said, 'Film me.'" A collective murmur swept the crowd. Nico's earnest face scrunched in concentration. His small finger hit the next preset phrase Sofia and he had crafted earlier. "They want Papa, kneel." At that, Don Massimo's jaw visibly tightened. Other elders exchanged looks of shock and disgust. For a mafia boss to be brought to his knees through coercion, Luca Caruso had planned to violate the code of honor in the worst way, by using a child and a woman. Finally, Nico added a phrase of his own devising. He typed with one hand, slowly but clearly, then hit speak. Sofia safe. Tears freely flowed down Sofia's cheeks now. In 2 simple words, Nico had conveyed to this hardened audience that Sofia had protected him, that she was not just an outsider, but someone who had kept the Don's son safe through all of this. Giancarlo's composure nearly cracked. He quickly wiped at his eyes and put a hand on Nico's shoulder with pride. There was hardly a dry eye among the onlookers, including some of the tough old Dons who had grandchildren of their own. Publicly hearing a vulnerable child voice the treachery he endured and affirm the woman who defended him carried more weight than any piece of paper or gadget. Luca Caruso looked lost, his mouth opening and closing with no sound. He realized there would be no wriggling out of this knot. Don Massimo cleared his throat, voice stern. "Luca Caruso," he pronounced. "We have heard and seen enough. You have broken sacred codes, endangering a child of a Don, attempting to dishonor a family through cowardly acts." He shook his head slowly, as if in genuine sorrow. "You are no brother to us. You are cast out from this commission." "No, Massimo, wait." Caruso blanched, all bravado gone. 2 of his own allied bosses stepped away from him as if he were contagious. One made the sign of the cross. Giancarlo stood tall, flanked by Sofia and Nico. His voice was low, with a dangerous edge of satisfaction. "Your territory and operations are forfeit, Caruso, as decided by the commission." Don Massimo nodded in confirmation. "So it is. And you will depart now under guard. What judgment follows will be in accordance with our laws." His vague wording barely concealed the truth. Caruso might leave this hall alive, but likely would not live out the week once mafia justice was meted out. 2 of Don Massimo's enforcers stepped forward. They seized Luca Caruso by the arms. He struggled briefly, then sagged, defeated. As Caruso was dragged past Giancarlo, he sneered with remaining bravado, hissing under his breath, "Enjoy your victory, Giancarlo. This isn't the end." Giancarlo locked eyes with him, unflinching. "Yes, it is," he replied quietly. They hauled Caruso away. Sofia let out a breath she felt she'd been holding for days. It was over. The nightmare orchestrated by Luca Caruso was finally over. A gentle weight fell on her shoulder. Giancarlo's hand. "Thank you," he whispered. In those 2 words he poured a world of emotion. Sofia simply covered his hand with her own, smiling through her tears. Around them, the other Dons quietly dispersed, murmuring among themselves. Several gave Giancarlo respectful nods as they left, and a few even patted Nico's back gently in passing, a silent apology for ever doubting the boy's place. One of the older Donnas, the wife of Don Massimo, paused to cup Sofia's face kindly. "Brava, child," the woman said, eyes warm. "You protected him like a true madre. The De Lucas are lucky to have you." Sofia flushed with humble gratitude. At last, only Giancarlo, Sofia, Nico, and their closest allies remained. Roberto was organizing the collection of evidence and ensuring any of Caruso's remaining personnel were rounded up. The adrenaline of confrontation ebbed, leaving relief and fatigue. Nico tugged at Giancarlo's pant leg. The Don bent down, and Nico reached his arms up. Giancarlo lifted his son and held him close, resting his cheek against Nico's hair. It was a tender, unguarded embrace in front of everyone. Once, Giancarlo might have been too proud to display such vulnerability publicly, but not now. He closed his eyes, savoring the fact that Nico was safe. Sofia watched father and son with a full heart. She felt Giancarlo's arm extend, drawing her gently into the hug as well. She stepped in and wrapped one arm around them both. A small cheer went up from Roberto and the others, a moment of pure celebration among those who had fought for this family. Later that afternoon, back at the estate, the household bustled with an energy of renewal. News of Caruso's disgrace had spread like wildfire. Allies sent flowers and notes of congratulations. Even those who'd been lukewarm to Giancarlo's engagement were now sending fine bottles of wine and baby gifts. Someone assumed a wedding and more children might be on the horizon soon. To Sofia's amused embarrassment, in the quiet of Giancarlo's office, he and Sofia stood looking out the window as Nico played in the garden under Teresa's watch. The boy was carefree in the sunshine, chasing bubbles that one of the guards good-naturedly blew into the air. Giancarlo turned to Sofia. "You know you don't have to truly go through with it if you don't want," he said softly. Sofia faced him, brow slightly furrowed. "Go through with what?" He smiled faintly. "Marrying me. I announced it publicly to protect you, but now that Caruso is dealt with, if you'd rather walk away, I will make sure you're safe regardless. No consequences, no hard feelings." Sofia looked at Giancarlo's face. The man who had just risked everything for his son, who had stood by her, who had become so dear to her in such a short time. Did she want to walk away? She reached out and took his hand. "I'm not going anywhere, Giancarlo," she said softly. "Nico needs me." And her voice caught, but she continued honestly, "Maybe you do too." His fingers tightened around hers. There was a flash of relief and joy in his eyes before he masked it. "I do," he admitted. "More than I realized." They stood there, hand in hand. It wasn't a dramatic kiss or a fairy tale declaration of love, but it was real. Two people bound by their devotion to a remarkable child and by a shared crucible of trials. "We'll take things one day at a time," Sophia said, her practical nature asserting itself even as her heart swelled. Giancarlo nodded. "One day at a time, and if you're ready for more, you let me know." There was a subtle question in his tone, a hope. Sophia answered by lifting his hand to her lips and brushing a gentle kiss across his knuckles. Giancarlo's breath caught, eyes shining. A sudden, excited peal of laughter from the garden made them both turn. Nico was clapping at an especially large bubble that floated his way. He pointed at it, calling out, "Ah!" for them to see. Sophia laughed softly. "We should join him," Giancarlo agreed, and together they headed toward the door to the terrace. Before they reached it, Roberto appeared, striding quickly down the hall with his phone in hand and an alarmed look on his face. "Don Giancarlo," he said urgently, "we have a situation." Sophia and Giancarlo exchanged a quick glance. "What now?" Roberto lowered his voice. "Our surveillance team picked up an encrypted message circulating on the dark channels just now. It's from an organization we've only heard whispers about." He turned his phone to show an image. On the screen was a symbol, a silver crucifix overlaying a black crown. Giancarlo inhaled sharply. Sophia didn't recognize it, but the way both men reacted sent a shiver through her. "Who are they?" she asked. Roberto's tone was grave. "They call themselves the Order of the Cross and Crown, an old, secretive faction, one that even the Commission fears, or at least respects. We thought it was mostly legend." Giancarlo read the message beneath the symbol. His face went ashen. He handed the phone to Sophia so she could see. It was a short directive, chilling in its simplicity. "Return the boy, tonight." Sophia felt as if the floor dropped from under her. "Return the boy, Nico?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. Giancarlo's jaw clenched. They must believe Nico belongs with them for some reason. There were rumors about his maternal lineage, but I never paid them heed. His eyes flashed with fear and fury. "They will not take my son." A familiar high-pitched crackle suddenly emanated from the baby monitor device perched on Giancarlo's desk, a device that also picked up signals from Nico's AAC tablet when in range. Sophia's head whipped around. Nico's tablet, left on the window seat, had lit up. One word pulsed on the screen in bright red letters. "Hum." At that same instant, a thin, invasive whine drifted through the open French doors from the garden. Not again, Sophia thought, heart pounding. She and Giancarlo raced onto the terrace. Down on the lawn, Nico had stopped chasing bubbles. He stood stiffly, hands slapped over his ears, face contorted in pain. Teresa, confused, was kneeling beside him, trying to figure out what was wrong. The guard with the bubble wand looked around in panic, hearing nothing himself, but Sophia and Giancarlo heard it. That awful hum, coming from somewhere close, somewhere inside the estate grounds. A cold dread gripped Sophia's spine. Caruso was gone, which could only mean one thing. As Giancarlo bolted toward his son, Sophia stayed frozen for a split second on the terrace, realization crashing over her like icy water. She looked back into the shadowed halls of the mansion, eyes wide. This wasn't over. Caruso had been only the first knife thrown at their family. The real enemy was just beginning to reveal itself. The hum bore into the evening air, relentless and haunting. Sophia steeled herself, adrenaline surging anew. She darted off the terrace toward Nico and Giancarlo, shouting for Roberto and the guards. Above, the first stars of night gleamed innocently, unaware of the fresh nightmare descending on the De Luca family. And as the last of the sun's light died, Sophia felt it deep in her bones. A new battle, far more sinister, had begun.